Alien is directed by Ridley Scott, written by Dan O'Bannon, and stars Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, Veronica Cartwright, Harry Dean Stanton, John Hurt, Ian Holm, and Yaphet Kotto. And Alien is about the crew of the spacecraft Nostromo, which is on its way back to Earth when a distress signal forces it to land on a nearby planetoid. The crew then head out to investigate and end up bringing a hostile entity back onto the ship. Now, of course, because Alien Covenant, the latest film in the Alien franchise and the latest film from Ridley Scott, is coming out in a few days, I'm going to be reviewing all of the Alien films. So Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection. I'm going to skip over Alien vs. Predator and Aliens vs. Predator Requiem because I don't want to do that to myself, and then Prometheus. Now, I'm so excited though to talk about Alien in particular because this movie came out 38 years ago and it still holds up perfectly well today. Alien is an absolutely phenomenal film. It is one of the most suspenseful and scariest movies ever made. It's written with very subtle but very rich themes, and it's one of the best looking movies as well of all time. And let's talk about those visuals first. Alien is one of the few movies I think, especially after the year 1970, that you can really describe as gothic horror, and a lot of that is due to the cinematography by Derek Van Lint, which overwhelms the film with darkness and keeps the camera really tight to induce this sheer claustrophobia throughout the film. Speaking of claustrophobia, every single room and every single hallway in Alien feels authentic. You really do feel like you're on this futuristic spaceship. You never for a second feel like you're watching a movie in the sense that the production design is just so infuriatingly good. It's so well designed that as you walk around the ship with these characters, you begin to feel like you know what every button is meant to do. Like everything just feels functional. And the cool trick that they do here is that you sort of get a general idea of the layout of the ship, but you still end up feeling sort of lost, like it's a labyrinth, which really helps because when you're running away from this alien creature, you want to feel lost, but at the same time you kind of want to know where you're going. It's a really interesting middle ground. Of course, the makeup effects for this movie are brilliant even today, all the blood and the gore and guts and body horror and whatnot. But of course, the alien designs in Alien are some of the best ever. They're nightmare fuel, absolutely, as well as how the alien sounds. Like, there's just something so sexual about how the alien looks that makes it feel just so disturbing. Jerry Goldsmith has a really good musical score to this movie, but like most great horror films, it's the silences that are most memorable. Of course, there are a lot of moments of pure suspense where you're practically just holding your breath throughout the entire film, and there are these moments where the film just shifts from sudden noise to complete silence, and it's really unsettling. It really reminds you of how cut off everybody is from planet Earth and how cut off everybody is from each other on the ship, which reminds me, every time you see an outdoor set, like when they're on the planet's surface in this movie, to this day, I still don't really know how they shot these scenes because they just look so real. But going back to sound, probably my favorite moment of sound in this movie is this scene where they use a motion tracker to track the alien, and it just keeps pulsing out this steady beat, and it really kind of gets on your nerves and starts to mirror your own heartbeat. And Ridley Scott wrings so much suspense out of this seemingly simple premise because he remembers to keep his characters in motion. There is terror in this movie, but not in the characters waiting for something to happen, but out of the characters knowing that they have to go back into what is pretty much open water now. And when the scares in Alien hit, they hit really hard. And there are no worthless jump scares in this movie. In fact, every time a scare happens, it never really releases tension. Instead, it ramps up the tension for everybody who's still alive. And what Ridley Scott did so well with Alien, especially for the time it was released in 1979, there was just something so dirty about his vision and Dan O'Bannon's vision of the future. You know, the future depicted here isn't pristine like in 2001: A Space Odyssey, or it's not fun like in Star Wars, but it's so dingy, it's blue collar, and that sort of adds to the horror of it. And like I mentioned a while ago, there is body horror to this movie that just makes it even more disturbing. And even when you see things, it's still scary, like in the sense that, you know, there are some horror movies that as soon as you see the monster, like it stops being scary, but here, even when you see the alien, it's still frightening. Now, the main complaint that most people have with the original Alien is that it's too slow. The editing here is by Terry Rawlings and Peter Weatherly, and I personally will defend the film's slow pace to my death, because for me, while the first act is slow, it's slow by design. People have to understand that when you call a movie slow, that's not, you know, meant to be a negative all the time. The slowness really does mirror what the lives of these characters are like, especially on this, you know, mining ship. So much of this movie, even in the second and third acts, is about the minutia of their jobs and them just sort of trying to figure out a way to survive. So in my opinion, speeding up the first act would lessen the impact of the rest of the film. I just don't think it would have fit with the tone of everything else. But of course, apart from some incredible suspense and some great wordless scenes where the characters are just trying to figure out how to survive, the editing is amazing in how this movie begins as a full ensemble piece, and slowly Ripley begins to emerge as the dominant perspective. You really get everyone's points of view at the beginning, but the movie slowly funnels you into Ripley's perspective, and I think that's a really cool achievement. And since we mentioned Ripley, let's talk about her. Let's talk about Sigourney Weaver, who has rightfully become one of the great horror movie icons because of just how good she is at looking scared, first of all, but also because of just how strong she remains in spite of her fear. And she never really sacrifices her femininity throughout the movie. But really, everyone in this cast is brilliant. First of all, Veronica Cartwright, the only other female member on the ship, Lambert. Her scared face is like the best scared face ever because it looks like she was actually being harassed by an alien. I was kind of scared for her, the actress. Harry Dean Stanton is instantly sympathetic in this movie. Yaphet Kotto has this great presence about him. And then John Hurt, rest in peace, is responsible, of course, for one of the greatest horror scenes of all time in this movie. And Ian Holm, Bilbo Baggins himself, reveals so many layers to his character as the film goes on, and he really sells it. So much so that when you watch this movie a second time, his performance completely changes. And what's great is that none of these people like each other. What was so ballsy, I think, about what Ridley Scott did with this movie is that, you know, none of these characters are supposed to have easy chemistry with each other because they don't like each other. And somehow he pulls that off, and you still manage to care about all these people as human beings. Now, it would be so easy to call Alien a simple film and to say that critics only love it because it came first before all these other horror movies tried to rip it off. But to me, even today, there's a lot that sets Alien apart from other horror movies. First of all, other than having characters who aren't stupid for once, you know, all their decisions are actually pretty believable. There's very subtle world building going on in the background. You know, you keep hearing about this company that these people work for, you hear about Weyland Yutani, and it just looms over everything. And as the movie goes on, you really begin to see how this company is posing a real threat to everybody. But I find Alien really interesting as a horror movie because it doesn't really delve into the social commentary that a lot of great horror movies do. It's not very, you know, interested in doing that. Rather, it's very subtly about the threat of perfection on imperfect beings, like human beings. It's a really bleak sort of idea that these perfect creatures aren't here to help us, instead they're out to get us. Like, that's what perfection does to imperfect beings. Like, for perfection to exist, imperfect beings have to die, and that's really, really interesting. I think it doesn't exactly play into the story itself, but it adds a lot of nuance to the entire film. And of course, given how H.R. Giger's designs for the aliens are very sexual in nature, there are a lot of sexual themes here, especially in the way the women are treated on the ship, the way the aliens look. It's just really, really cool, and I don't think a lot of people appreciate that side to Alien a lot. In summary, Alien is a spectacular film. I think this is Ridley Scott's best movie. Usually when you have that conversation of what is Ridley Scott's best movie, it's usually between Blade Runner and Alien. For me, it's still Alien. This is still his crowning achievement. Again, a lot of people might find this movie boring if they watch it for the first time today, but it is so worth it, I think, if you bring your 100% to the movie. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Alien. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whatever you guys think, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.